On waking, I understood why my employer had looked rather cross when I asked for my 2 days off. It's a Saturday today. I hadn't thought of this at the time. It only struck me when I was getting out of bed. Obviously, he had seen that it would mean my getting 4 days holiday straight off, and one couldn't expect him to like that. Still, for one thing, it wasn't my fault if Mother was buried yesterday, and not today. And then, again, I'd have had my Saturday and Sunday off, in any case. But naturally, this didn't prevent me from seeing my employer's point. Getting up was an effort, as I'd been really exhausted by the previous day's experiences. While shaving, I wondered how to spend the morning, and decided that a swim would do me good. So I caught the streetcar that goes down to the harbor. It was quite like old times. A lot of young people were in the swimming pool, amongst them Marie Cardona, who used to be a typist at the office. I was rather keen on her in those days, and I fancy she liked me too. But she was with us so short a time that nothing came of it. While I was helping her to climb onto a raft, I let my hand stray over her breasts. Then she lay flat on the raft while I trod water. After a moment, she turned and looked at me. Her hair was over her eyes, and she was laughing. I clambered up onto the raft beside her. The air was pleasantly warm, and half-jokingly, I let my head sink back upon her lap. She didn't seem to mind, so I let it stay there. I had the sky full in my eyes, all blue and gold, and I could feel Marie's stomach rising and falling gently under my head. We must have stayed a good half-hour on the raft, both of us half asleep. When the sun got too hot, she dived off, and I followed. I caught up with her, put my arm round her waist, and we swam side by side. She was still laughing. While we were drying ourselves on the edge of the swimming pool, she said, "I'm browner than you." I asked her if she'd come to the movies with me that evening. She laughed again and said, yes, if I'd take her to the comedy everybody was talking about, the one with Fernandel in it. When we had dressed, she stared at my black tie and asked if I was in mourning. I explained that my mother had died. When? She asked, and I said, yesterday. She made no remark, though I thought she shrank away a little. I was just going to explain to her that it wasn't my fault, but I checked myself, as I remembered having said the same thing to my employer, and realizing then it sounded rather foolish. Still, foolish or not, somehow one can't help feeling a bit guilty, I suppose. Anyhow, by evening, Marie had forgotten all about it. The film was funny in parts, but some of it was downright stupid. She pressed her leg against mine while we were in the picture house, and I was fondling her breast. Toward the end of the show, I kissed her, but rather clumsily. Afterward, she came back with me to my place. When I woke up, Marie had gone. She told me her aunt expected her first thing in the morning. I remembered it was a Sunday, and that put me off. I've never cared for Sundays. So I turned my head and lazily sniffed the smell of brine that Marie's head had left on the pillow. I slept until 10. After that, I stayed in bed until noon, smoking cigarettes. I decided not to lunch at Celeste's restaurant as I usually did. They'd be sure to pester me with questions, and I dislike being questioned. So I fried some eggs and ate them off the pan. I did without bread, as there wasn't any left, and I couldn't be bothered going down to buy it. After lunch, I felt at loose ends and roamed about the little flat. It suited us well enough when Mother was with me, but now that I was by myself, it was too large, and I'd moved the dining table into my bedroom. That was now the only room I used. It had all the furniture I needed: a brass bedstead, a dressing table, some cane chairs whose seats had more or less caved in, a wardrobe with a tarnished mirror. The rest of the flat was never used, so I didn't trouble to look after it. A bit later, for want of anything better to do, I picked up an old newspaper that was lying on the floor and read it. There was an advertisement of crucian salts, and I cut it out and pasted it into an album where I keep things that amuse me in the papers. Then I washed my hands, and as a last resource, went out onto the balcony. My bedroom overlooks the main street of our district, though it was a fine afternoon. The paving blocks were black and glistening. What few people were about seemed in an absurd hurry. First of all, there came a family going for their Sunday afternoon walk. 2 small boys in sailor suits, with short trousers hardly down to their knees, and looking rather uneasy in their Sunday best. Then a little girl with a big pink bow and black patent leather shoes. Behind them was their mother, an enormously fat woman in a brown silk dress, and their father, a dapper little man, whom I knew by sight. He had a straw hat, a walking stick, and a butterfly tie. Seeing him beside his wife, I understood why people said he came of a good family and had married beneath him. Next came a group of young fellows, the local bloods, with sleek oiled hair, red ties, coats cut very tight at the waist, braided pockets, and square-toed shoes. I guessed they were going to one of the big theaters in the center of the town. That was why they had started out so early and were hurrying to the streetcar stop, laughing and talking at the top of their voices. After they had passed, the street gradually emptied. By this time, all the matinees must have begun. Only a few shopkeepers and cats remained about. Above the sycamores bordering the road, the sky was cloudless, but the light was soft. The tobacconist on the other side of the street brought a chair out onto the pavement in front of his door and sat astride it, resting his arms on the back. The streetcars, which a few minutes before had been crowded, were now almost empty. In the little café Chez Pierrot, beside the tobacconist's, the waiter was sweeping up the sawdust in the empty restaurant. A typical Sunday afternoon. I turned my chair round and seated myself like the tobacconist, as it was more comfortable that way. After smoking a couple of cigarettes, I went back to the room, got a tablet of chocolate, and returned to the window to eat it. Soon after, the sky clouded over, and I thought a summer storm was coming. However, the clouds gradually lifted. All the same, they had left in the street a sort of thread of rain, which made it darker. I stayed watching the sky for quite a while. At 5, there was a loud clanging of streetcars. They were coming from the stadium in our suburb, where there had been a football match. Even the back platforms were crowded and people were standing on the steps. Then another streetcar brought back the teams. I knew they were the players by the little suitcase each man carried. They were bawling out their team song, "Keep the ball rolling, boys." One of them looked up at me and shouted, "We licked them." I waved my hand and called back, "Good work." From now on, there was a steady stream of private cars. The sky had changed again. A reddish glow was spreading up beyond the housetops. As dusk set in, the street grew more crowded. People were returning from their walks, and I noticed the dapper little man with the fat wife amongst the passers-by. Children were whimpering and trailing wearily after their parents. After some minutes, the local picture houses disgorged their audiences. I noticed that the young fellows coming from them were taking longer strides and gesturing more vigorously than at ordinary times. Doubtless the picture they'd been seeing was of the Wild West variety. Those who had been to the picture houses in the middle of the town came a little later and looked more sedate, though a few were still laughing. On the whole, however, they seemed languid and exhausted. Some of them remained loitering in the street under my window. A group of girls came by, walking arm in arm. The young men under my window swerved so as to brush against them and shouted humorous remarks, which made the girls turn their heads and giggle. I recognized them as girls from my part of the town, and 2 or 3 of them whom I knew looked up and waved to me. Just then the street lamps came on, all together, and they made the stars that were beginning to glimmer in the night sky paler still. I felt my eyes getting tired, what with the lights and all the movement I'd been watching in the street. There were little pools of brightness under the lamps, and now and then a streetcar passed, lighting up a girl's hair, or a smile, or a silver bangle. Soon after this, as the streetcars became fewer, and the sky showed velvety black above the trees and lamps, the street grew emptier, almost imperceptibly, until a time came when there was nobody to be seen, and a cat, the first of the evening, crossed, unhurrying, the deserted street. It struck me that I'd better see about some dinner. I had been leaning so long on the back of my chair, looking down, that my neck hurt when I straightened myself up. I went down, bought some bread and spaghetti, did my cooking, and ate my meals standing. I'd intended to smoke another cigarette at my window, but the night had turned rather chilly, and I decided against it. As I was coming back after shutting the window, I glanced at the mirror and saw reflected in it a corner of my table, with my spirit lamp and some bits of bread beside it. It occurred to me that somehow I'd got through another Sunday, that Mother now was buried, and tomorrow I'd be going back to work as usual. Really, nothing in my life had changed.